Season 2, Take Poop. Hey you, how you doing? If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. If you are new to the channel, consider taking a few moments to just check out our content, make yourself at home. Here, we offer support and love to one another. And then consider subscribing to help support the channel. And so we're definitely grateful for our return viewership, as we know you found genuine value in what we are creating here. Also, let us know in the comments if you've subscribed, and that'll get us nice and warmed up for the habit of interacting together. So let's get started. We're rolling. I don't see it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me once again at House of the Owl Star with Jason Harper 101-on-1. I have a special guest this evening with me. What's your name again?
James B. Potts.
James B. Potts. Jay, as I know him. And so everybody welcome Jay. Hey, Jay, how are you?
How are you, Jason, and everyone else?
They're not going to reply, bro.
No?
No, we're recording this.
We're not live?
No, this isn't live. So is your coffee good?
The coffee is excellent, Jason. Thank you very much. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. We can get started if you'll just take your shirt off first.
Nobody can stand that.
Right. Please don't. I usually get started with asking people who come to visit, just a general where you're from, what's going on with you, something interesting about yourself, and what you're looking forward to in the next little while.
So, where I'm from, I was born in Greenwood, South Carolina, mostly because nobody trusted the hospital where I was going to be raised. So, I was born in Greenwood and moved immediately to Clinton, South Carolina, if you're not from there. Or if you are from there, it's Clinton, and it's near absolutely nothing. The Coal Point Monster was famous in Lawrence next door at one point, but there is nothing in that part of South Carolina. But I was raised in a town of 8,000 people, Clinton, South Carolina. Both of my parents were from Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is just below Charlotte, North Carolina, right on the line. My family has been there since the 1700s. I was not raised there, but I later moved there where my parents were from and lived there for, I think, 17 years. And then moved to the Atlanta area, which is where I've been for maybe 14 years, something like that. So what I'm up to at the moment, I found myself in the film industry, which was never my intent, nor was living in Atlanta, but I ended up in Atlanta, and much of the film industry has moved to Atlanta. At one time, I think we were filming more TV in Atlanta than LA and California, or LA and New York combined. I think it is probably still the TV capital of the world. And a lot of the infrastructure has moved there, although a lot of the big decisions are still made in New York, and most of the primaries are still flown in. There are a lot of actors that are local, and a lot of people have moved full-time, and a lot of the big stars have bought houses there. So I call it Third City. LA and New York can fight over 1 and 2, but we're basically Third City. And I just kind of accidentally fell into film and was doing it part-time and have been doing it full-time for a few years. So that's what I'm doing. And what I plan to do, or I don't even know. I mean, people ask me what my goals in this industry are. and I never intended to be in the industry. So people have asked me what my goals in the industry are, and I don't really necessarily have any. I never intended to be in the industry, and I have accomplished so much that I never intended to do that I'm just surprised at what happens. I just take it one day at a time. I used to joke um, when MASH started, there would be the woman that's just running for the helicopter when they bring the patients in. They know who she was now, but for years, nobody knew who that woman was. It's just every time MASH comes on, there's some random woman running at the helicopter. And I just thought it would be really cool to be that one random person nobody could figure out who is that's on TV all the time. That was kind of my goal for a while. So yeah, I'm taking it one day at a time. I am now at this point, most of what I am in with lines is mostly on YouTube. I'm a what they call a non-union actor. And I've also gotten to where I've directed a little. I've done a fair amount of stunts, some driving, a lot of the indie films, which is mostly what I do. We do what it takes to make the movie magic happen. So it doesn't really matter what your title is. I might be the set finder. I'm working in costume. I'm working in props. Some things, the primaries end up, well, if we're able to cover our heads up, we'll be the background too. So I might be the guy that's fighting with me. So it's like we do a little bit of everything. But I've learned a lot about the film industry, and there's probably a lot more of it, a lot more than what I know that I don't know. But it's been interesting. And I've never really had a plan to stay at it. I just don't have plans to leave it either. It's just what I do. I'm letting life take me where it takes me at this point.
You said that earlier when we spoke that you had won a couple of awards and whatnot too. So do you care about mentioning that? Would you like to mention that?
The only one I remember mentioning, and really, I mean, it's not that I've really gotten a lot of awards, although I was recently nominated, I think, in one of the film festivals. I didn't win, but I was nominated as Best Actor and Best Director. And at least some of the people that beat me are some of my colleagues that I've worked with. But I think the one I specifically had mentioned is I had gotten a Civil Rights Award. So some of what I've done, I was talking about sort of there is a piece of the industry, whereas I play a lot of bad guys. Or as one director says, I'm not actually bad or evil, I'm just complicated. But the material that we're working with is very difficult material. And in some cases, it's even documentary type stuff. And in order to tell certain stories about people that have had bad things happen to them in the reality of history, someone has to portray the villains in that. And so I have played some period pieces in the 1800s where I am obviously not a nice guy and have enabled people to tell stories that it is very important to them to tell. And they have been grateful that I've been able or willing to help them do that. Whereas I'm portrayed in an unlikable light, it helps this important story to get told. And so I did receive a Civil Rights Award a few years ago.
That's awesome.
And one of the things that touched me, there were some people that were murdered in Georgia back, I want to say it was in the 50s. And most people are not familiar with it, but the story, Martin Luther King Jr. was involved in this. They're still trying to catch the perpetrators, even though they would be in their 90s if they're still alive. And there is a memorial out near where this took place, one of the historical markers. And I had stopped by to just familiarize myself with some of the actual history. And I just like reading historical markers anyway, but because we were involved in this, even more so. And while I was at the historical marker, some cars pulled up and some other people came out there to the memorial. And I realized that that was actually the families the descendants of the people who had been murdered. And there I was, one of the people, even though my character was not actually one of the murderers, he was the catalyst behind what a lot of had happened, and his relatives were involved in it. And I let these people know, that I was going to let them have their space, that I would leave and let them have that space. And they said, "Oh no, would you please stay here with us?" And they wanted to get pictures of me at the memorial, and they appreciated what I was doing to bring the story to the public. Whereas some of the locals don't necessarily appreciate it being brought back up. So it's one of those things in many different ways is difficult to do, but I have been able to do in the industry. I do often enjoy playing villains, but sometimes the types of villains that I play are uncomfortable to be portraying. And that's part of the industry too, I guess. But yeah, that's where that award came from. It's a medallion on it's got the colors of the United States, the red, white, and blue, that goes around your neck and you wear it. And they presented that at a dinner. It's actually the Moores Bridge Road lynching or massacre that took place somewhat between Athens, Georgia, and Monroe, Georgia, back in the early 1950s, if I remember correctly. But I have friends that actually do that every year and have had me involved in it a few years.
That's awesome. That's very cool. I appreciate you sharing that with us. So, Jay has been a friend of mine. We've known each other
25 years ish.
Close to it, yeah, somewhere around there. And so I really am excited and happy he's here to share his story with us. And I've been excited about it ever since I saw him start to post that he's been doing some of these extra spots and things in different television shows and films and whatnot. I definitely wanted to. He's been an inspiration for me as far as getting out there and doing something really that I didn't expect him to do, and being a creative, a bit more of a hustling style creative than he was. He's always been a creative. Um, he's always been in the little bit off crew that I tend to be around. And so he's always been, for me, he's always been an interesting character. We've gotten to know Dimensions, but we always pretty much stayed acquainted friends. I'm just, again, extremely grateful. So from this point, if you'd like, James, to get us started with, you already went through where you're from and whatnot, but if you want to get into your story, like how you were raised, what kind of experiences did you have, and lead into one of your rock bottoms, if not kind of associate with all of them in some way too, because he's not a bad guy, but he's complicated.
So yeah, I don't know what points I'll touch on. I don't know where this will go. But as I had mentioned, I grew up in South Carolina. My family has been in the Carolinas since there was only one Carolina. I grew up in small town America, what would probably be described as a normal home. It's taken me quite some time to realize there really is no such thing as a normal home. And a normal home is actually abnormal. But I grew up with two parents that were married and loved each other. I had one brother who died in his 40s of cancer. We're coming up pretty close on the memorial of that. But small town, small neighborhood. There were things like there are anywhere, but as much as can be. I mean, it wasn't like it was a dangerous neighborhood. There weren't bad things that happened. There were other kids close to my age in our neighborhood, and we grew up playing ball, skateboarding, riding go-karts and motorcycles, playing in the woods, climbing trees, just all of that type of stuff at a time period before really franchises came in. I witnessed all that happening. I don't know where it took place in the rest of the country, but where we were, there was no Kmart, no Walmart, no McDonald's until later. So if you wanted to eat, you went to Whiteford's Giant Burger. And if you wanted something different than that, you went to Robert's Drive-In and got a hot dog. The pharmacy was owned by a family. There were a couple of gas stations that were owned by families. But each little different thing that you might need, there was a family that did that. And everybody knew them. It was agro-textile. We were kind of the odd ones out because most people were related about 10 different directions, and they were either farmers or they were mill workers. My father was a forester, so in a way he was a farmer. He was a pine tree farmer. He worked for a big timber company, and the closest place that he could be to where he grew up in his job as a forester was in Clinton, South Carolina, and was able to, unlike most people were moved around in the industry, and probably at the cost of promotions where he could have gone here or there and made more money. And he wanted to stay in one place and have a stable household and managed it. Often wasn't an option for people, but he was able to do that and was with that company pretty much to the end when it shut down. The woods industry, kind of like many things in this country, is turned into other things, and most of the timber is grown in other countries, and the foresters aren't needed like they were back then. But it was a good job, but he was not originally local. But we were there long enough, and so we played in the yard with our friends, and we went to church, and I was in scouts, and my mother was the den mother, and in Little League, Dad was one of my coaches at one time. And I had a interesting experience in school in that it ended up being a little diverse. There was a orphanage that was open to day students to bring in extra revenue. And I went to first, second, third grade at this school that had been started as an orphanage, but I got to go to private school. And then I went to public elementary school for a couple of years. And then I went to public junior high, which was actually a fairly horrible experience. And then I went back to the school that I went to first, second, and third grade, and went to ninth through 12th grade there, and even stayed home and went to a local college, which was literally founded off of that orphanage at one time for my freshman year. And then was just tired of small town life. So I went 6 hours away from home my sophomore year, but still a protected environment, very small school, about 450 students. My family was, I guess, what you would call right-wing fundamentalists. It's what many people would call it. And so was the college that I went off to. So it was kind of that weird dichotomy in that I was kind of going far from home to get away from home, but still inside that bubble. And ironically, however it came about, while in that type of school, got involved in things towards the end of my schooling, some drinking and some drugs, which would then take over a decade of my life. I got out of that school really before, I mean, it was causing problems, but before it really came, because I started so late. I've told people I would have probably never graduated college had I been doing that any earlier, but I shot out the end of college. And in fact, they were so angry at me, they suspended me after I left. I didn't even know you could do that, but they held my diploma up for a while just out of spite. But I got married right as all that was unraveling, and that didn't last very long. And then I was single for 17 years, which is kind of weird too. Most people don't take 17 years off. But I spent over a decade drinking and doing some drugs, and some of that becoming harder and harder stuff, and doing damage to my life and relationships, and just completely destructive. And then spent a number of years, which is never really ending, but certainly on the front end, a number of years putting that back together as best I could.
Well, can I rewind you for a second?
You can try.
Okay. So In your experience with upbringing, and of course, I don't want you don't have to share anything you don't want to. I'm just curious about what are some of the things, even if it's hindsight, like what are some of the things that you felt like uh, as a child growing up in school, high school, junior high, those 12 years into heading towards college and whatnot, were you lacking or missing in your environment that you feel like created a dissociation or disconnection? And also, when did you start to find out in your actions or ways of thinking, or however you want to look at it, like what were you doing to figure out that you wanted to find a connection or fill that missing portion?
Well, I know you said in hindsight, and that's an interesting way to look at it. I know part of it. Um, my family, at some point, I realized that they were different than a lot of families and what they did and didn't
Mm.
do. And at that age, I didn't really understand, and still don't, a lot of it, the backstories as to how my family got to make the choices they did. I just know that they were trying to make a better life.
Mhm.
Um, I do know that there was some alcoholism on one side of my family, and that I was in my 40s when I realized how some of that had played out, had affected one of my parents in the way
Mhm.
that they reacted to things and raised me. The other side of the family, there was not that, but there's a generational thing and the way things
Mhm.
were done and the way they were raised and what was expected out of kids. And as I began to understand how they were raised, my childhood made more sense. But as a kid, it was just weird. I can't do this. My friends can do this. I get in trouble. They don't get in trouble. And I didn't understand any of that. And some of the stuff, I mean, I got paddled for things I didn't do. And if I got paddled at school for something I didn't do, then I got paddled when I got home. And if somebody wanted to beat me up, I wasn't allowed to defend myself. And so I became very reclusive early on.
Mhm.
Um, and so, like, my best friend as a small child was my dog. And I just go off into the woods with my dog. I became a voracious reader. I also began to realize growing up that the different institutions that we're supposed to trust to protect us and teach us the right thing, that's not really what was going on with the people in those institutions. And so I became aware of things that were going on in the church, and I began to become aware of things that were going on with, like, the police, but the people who are what their personal lives were like, and people that were teachers or principals or whatnot, um, having grown up in some cases with their children. I had windows into what was going on, or windows into, if you were related to this person, you can do what you want, but if you're not, you can't do it, which is a good upbringing because you learn that's how the world works. But a lot of inconsistencies, and people I was supposed to respect were doing things that weren't respectable things. And I've continued to see that, but trying to fit that into a framework as a child. So, I don't know how much of it was my temperament and how much of it was genetics. And at a certain point, it just became outright rebelliousness. The idea that if you're going to tell me I can't do this, then you have to do it yourself. You're not going to say, I can't do it, and you're going to do it, or everybody else is going to do it. And of course, that becomes destructive too. Just doing things because I can to prove I can. Just because I can doesn't mean I have to. But with, like, addictive type things, you don't realize until it's too late what addiction is. And so it's not like you could just walk away from it when it ceases to be fun and you realize it's a problem.
Mhm.
So I wasn't raised around any of that. And it was really considered, I mean, in other people's families, it was probably normal. Other people grow up in the middle of it. I know people that had alcohol given to them in their when they were a baby in their milk.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I didn't grow up around any of that. So I came to it all on my own, just as rebellion. I mean, one of the first beers I ever had, we weren't allowed as college students, even if we were of age, even if we were 50, to drink, even if it was summer and we were in Germany with our parents and grandparents, or we could be thrown out of school when it was found out, which made no sense. And the faculty was not under the same terms that we were. And somebody offered me a beer, and I was just offended because it was my job to tell people I don't drink. Somebody said, don't give it to him. He doesn't drink. And the fact was, none of us were supposed to be drinking. But I'm like, I tell you I don't drink. You don't tell me I don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
So I drank like half a beer. And I don't know if that ever happened again. The world didn't end. Turned out I wasn't really a beer drinker. I'm not a sophisticated drinker. If I'm going to drink a lot, and I'm going to drink whatever's the cheapest. And I'm not going to stop. So I did that, which caused me to run into people that were doing other things. My circumstances began to deteriorate. The people I was around began to deteriorate. And I was introduced to other things. And at a certain point, I did this, why not do that? And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of things that I didn't do when I was out there too, but there were a lot of things that I did do. And so the things that people that have studied or lived it or are involved in it at all, they talk about jails, institutions, and death. And it didn't seem like it at the time, but I did little pieces of time. But it turned out it had added up to like 8 months out of 2 years. Just a little here, a little there. And
you're talking about like jail time or
like county time. So yeah, jail, but
okay. Sure.
A week here, 2 weeks there. I mean, 8 months is a lot out of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, looking back on it, I was put in various different facilities trying to help me, but none of them are really equipped to do that, particularly if you don't have insurance. So, in and out of all that stuff. And it really, I mean, in the scope of my life, it wasn't a long a period of time, but all of that, I've probably been legally dead. I hit all the points in that. And it became unsustainable. I mean, it was absolutely no fun, but what's the solution? And so I had to want a solution. And I'm not really going to talk a lot about what that is, except that there is a solution and people aren't alone. And the answer is there for anybody that wants to find it. So I took the steps that were necessary, and I was blessed to be able to benefit from that. So,
well, before we get into that, I do want to interrupt again and go into another layer of inquiry when it comes to your actions and your ways of being that you feel like you were cultivating from this, disconnection, this dissociation, like of not feeling a part of, not feeling entirely connected with the whatever, like the world, the school, because those are the things that brought you into you said that you were disciplined, and then so you stepped aside and decided to become quiet and decided to become isolated, but you were reading, so there was some connection in your reading. However, you still moved into this path that had you beyond the solution that you found later. Part of that is societal, what I'm hearing, right, from what you're saying is there's a societal acknowledgement. There's a societal coming of age even that has people be presented with things. And so it lit something in you and had you become excited in that way of doing things. And so there's a part of you that's saying, I'm not supposed to do this, even though the world didn't fall apart, right? but I know I'm not supposed to do this. So, what experience looking back do you see where you justified or got into that groove of receiving something out of it? Because you're getting something out of it. And so I'm just curious if you can touch on that dynamic within the story.
And I don't know if I'll hit on it or not, but I know at a certain point, maybe halfway through high school, on top of realizing that things at the top and the people that were telling us what to do were not doing it, I was becoming very dissatisfied being off in the corner. And one of the things a lot of people actually that do the things that I did really don't feel like they fit in. And I do remember as a small child knowing something was different and literally with that mentality of a small child thinking, well, am I an alien? Am I some sort of cyborg? Maybe I'm not actually human. Or at the very least, I'm adopted.
Right.
Now, you look at any of the guys in my family, we all are very obviously the same family. But as a kid,
Right.
Why am I not connecting? And then by the time I got up, like when I was in high school, I ran track. It's not really that much of a team sport. And I was the camera guy, which is interesting in what I do now, but I filmed the football games for the football team. I was technically part of the team. And 2 years of that, because I've never really cared about football. I mean, it's as interesting as any sport, but if, I don't really care about watching other people play sports. I don't have that fascination that people in this culture, and particularly in the South, have with football. But you're supposed to be in the South. You have to be an athlete as a guy, or at least in a small town in that day and age. And so by my rising junior year, I had been filming the football team for 2 years, and I wanted to be more. And I never felt like I added up on the team. But looking back on it, I played with really good guys. I mean, we were actually written up in Sports Illustrated.
Oh, wow.
We had the longest winning streak of any pro college or high school team in the country at the time. And I think we hadn't lost a game in like 2.5 years, but we only had a string and a half. I mean, this is 2A private ball. And so when I look back on it, I started playing when other people had been playing for years, and they were very talented people. So, of course, I wasn't necessarily measuring up. And I'm not particularly that much of an athlete, although I became a little better as I got older. But I started trying to recreate myself. And some of that was good, and some of it was bad. When I came home from college, I told my mom that I had turned into a chameleon, and she didn't seem that amused. But I was getting to where I could kind of blend into different things. And I had gotten to where I hated being that little nerd that got beat up all the time and couldn't defend himself, wasn't allowed to. So my first year of college.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
What
do you mean by wasn't allowed to?
I wasn't allowed to be in a fight.
And
I was going to be in trouble even if I didn't throw a punch.
And
that was just some of my upbringing of turn the
family.
other cheek.
That was a family.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which means that people that like beating up on people pick on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this is going on. Well, my freshman year in college, I had the opportunity. I was in ROTC. Anybody that knows ROTC knows the first 2 years are a joke. It's not even real ROTC. But I was sent as a freshman in college to the U.S. Airborne School, which is something that you do with scholarship students and upperclassmen occasionally, if they're good enough. I was the only one that joined the ROTC Rangers when I did that got in. And I was the only freshman, at least that year, that they sent to jump school. That's just not something. And I jumped out of planes, which was terrifying. And I'm still scared of heights. But I walked out of 5 military aircraft nonetheless. And then I changed schools and went where nobody knew me. And when I walked in up there, I was in really good shape. and people knew I'd been jumping out of planes, and I still had the military haircut. And the school was unusual in that it had its own fire department. And so I was an actual OSHA trained firefighter while I was in college, in addition to anything I was doing with school. And so firefighters are generally considered to be pretty cool by most people. And what I realized was nobody knew that I was that little nerd. And girls liked me and guys hung out with me. And it turned out some people were scared of me. And I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, somebody threw a water balloon at me one time and the people with them tackled them and dragged them down the mountain. And they're like, "Do you know what he's going to do to you?" And I'm like, "I was just impressed they almost hit me. What was I going to do to them? But this is awesome. People are scared of me and I didn't even have to get in a fight." And so I was intentionally faking all of these things and getting away with it, because the perception was already different when I got there. Some of that was good, but then that's when I began to pick up alcohol, and it turns out I don't moderate when I do that. It also turns out I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, which I have told people that was one of the predecessors. One, I was probably addicted to reading, which is it's healthy, but I've read like 4,000 books. So, it's like, so that's excessive. And then I became an adrenaline junkie. So not only was I a firefighter, and during the summers I was teaching horseback riding, and some of the things we were doing on horseback were not necessarily safe when people weren't looking. But then I got into rappelling and spelunking, and if I went hiking, I didn't just go hiking down to the end of the road. I literally hiked off the mountain and back. I mean, people never believed where I had actually been, but then we would just hike straight back, not along the trail. Let's see if we can get back going straight when there's cliffs and stuff in the way. So I was trying to, what I've told people is, I was really trying to convince myself that I was okay and convince myself that I was this tough guy. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you'd believe it too. And I don't really regret doing a lot of those things, but it wasn't necessary if I'd been comfortable in my skin at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm still, anybody that knows anything about actors, that actors are insecure people that are right out there in front of everybody a lot of the time. And I literally, I went off exploring recently. Now I'm 56 years old. And I went up to explore this abandoned train tunnel by myself. Nobody knows I'm out there. And did. And then on the way back, saw something off in the woods and went to explore it. And it looked like a sidewalk running through the mountain but I'm up on the cliffs. But I got to know what's down there. And so I went down there and there was no trail. So I just hitched the back of my pants and slid down the side of the cliff. Figured I'd figure out how to get back up later. And it turned out it was a bike trail where they've converted an old railroad trail. So it was another, not abandoned, but another railroad tunnel that's now a bike trail. And right as I fall off the cliff, somebody comes flying around the corner of a bicycle and just looks at the guy coming off the cliff and goes tearing off. And I'm like, oh, bicyclists, more bicyclists, more bicyclists. But I didn't come from the trail.
Right.
I'm just like, hey, I'm still 25. Let's go explore and see what's down there. So I'm still a little bit like that, although I've moderated it some. But some of the things I did when I was drinking, etc. One time I just decided to swim across the reservoir, like not the short way. Let's just swim out there where the ski boats are, because who cares what happens? Almost got clipped by some boats, got out in the middle and couldn't stop swimming. I was tired. I got burnt from the sun, ended up miles away with no shoes, having to walk like 12 miles back barefoot. These are not normal, healthy decisions. So I can look back on a lot of it now and just go, life's been an adventure. It's lucky I'm here, because I didn't think I'd make 30 and was perfectly cool with that. And now I'm getting pretty close to being twice that old. So there's been a lot of tragedy and a lot of bad decisions, but a lot of really interesting, cool stuff has happened. That first marriage didn't last very long, but I was able to get back together with a girlfriend of mine from prior to that. We'd only dated 3 weeks, but 20 something years later get together, and we've been married for almost 12 years, been together about 15 years.
So that's your wife now?
Yes.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that part. That's
I got
cool.
to help raise her kids. I've been pretty broke most of that time, but I've been, well, even before that, I went to the Cayman Islands with no money. Had $100, went to the Cayman Islands, stayed for 3 weeks and came back. Had part of a dollar when I got home. But
you had some change left.
But people don't do that. But since then, I've been up to Canada. I've been over to the UK twice with no money, just walking around with a backpack, catching trains and buses, but spent weeks over there, staying with people I didn't know, exploring old medieval ruins. Got to go visit the old manor house of my family from back. I mean, we're on one side, we're descended from William Wallace's brother and come out of Ayrshire, and we're from the Shire. And I got to go walk around that. It's renovated. It's like $8 million worth of condos now, but it looked like a castle version of the Addams Family house, covered in smog from Glasgow and not safe to be in. And I love their liability ideas over there. Go hurt yourself if you want to. Just don't come to court about it.
Right.
So you can explore old ruins and they don't care if you hurt yourself. Just don't come try to sue somebody over it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're allowed to go out in the pasture and climb up in the old tower and crawl around in the old crypt. And so I got to do that and meet really interesting people and, just a lot of things. I've got to sail on a tall ship, and I don't even know how many lighthouses I've been to and old grist mills. My wife and I just go explore old historical stuff, and got to film underground recently.
Nice.
I did a lot of spelunking in college, but not. I've been in a few commercial caves since then, but just being underground again, which is probably not what most people want to do, bat flying around my head. But the film down there underground was really good cinematically.
No, that had to be fun for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a short on YouTube, Shadows of the Ancients by Nicole Reyes. I have her permission to share that, so we would love for y'all to look that up.
Awesome.
And I'll throw mine in there while I'm doing it. I was able to direct my own short not too long ago during the strike. People that couldn't work for any of the big industries because they were on strike, that were bored, that were willing to work for free. 20 of us went out and filmed a little Robin Hood film called Outlaws of Sherwood, also available on YouTube, that I wrote and co-produced and directed and acted in. So for somebody that, the first play I was ever in, I forgot all of my lines. Now, granted, it was in French, and I was supposed to kiss the girl that was about to be our homecoming queen that I had a crush on, but I couldn't remember anything. So the fact that I've done maybe 30 productions that I spoke in and have been in another 150 productions where I'm walking around in the background, some of them on major things, most of which are covered by NDAs, but I can be seen on TV. I never intended to do any of that stuff. So it would be kind of crazy to have any huge goals in it, because I've accomplished way more than I ever intended to be doing in the first place.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the part about your rock bottoms that it had you shift. What was some of the, obviously it took some pain to get there. So what were you faced with and having that stuff shift?
I don't know, and I won't get a whole lot into this, but so I worked in the real world for a while, and because of my background, I worked in the medical industry in addictions treatment, and I'm probably not the only person that's unhappy with the way the medical industry is run in this country. And so I spent close to a decade working in the recovery industry. And because things were not particularly kosher and I was not allowed to do the things that I needed to be doing to help people who were like me back in the day, or ethically do the things that were going on, I am no longer in that industry. And it's not just where I worked. It's a lot of other places that I'm aware of. And it's a lot of the medical industry. It's profit centered. It's not the client or patient centered. And so I ended up not working again. And in this case, not through my own behaviors, which was very disappointing in society and culture and a lot of things. But I need to be doing something productive. And actually, I mean, the way I got into the industry, I did a little film. It was supposed to be a mini series. There's, I think, only one episode was ever done. But my now wife said, you know, they're filming down in Atlanta. They're not paying anything, but they need people with costumes. Or if you're not doing anything else and want to, you could go down there. And I went down there and filmed it. And I think I got one hot dog, no sides, no condiments. That was all I got paid, including eating. But it got me into the industry and it was kind of fun. And then I realized there's a background industry had moved into Atlanta. It's kind of difficult to make a living at, but more and more films were being there. And I started just doing like 2 or 3 a year as I could work them with my schedule. And then when I ended up not working, my wife was like, well, go do background while you look for work. I mean, you like doing that. And I was getting so much work that I didn't have time to be doing anything else. And then I did that for a while and I started doing a little acting because the longer I was in it, not everybody even wants to act. I mean, in fact, some people are terrified of the camera and they choose to work in front of it anyway. I haven't figured that out. I just, you know, I'm around actors enough now that I wanted to try that a little bit. And then I ended up not working. And then COVID hit and you couldn't work without going down to COVID test and you had to be vaccinated and you missed 2 or 3 days of actual working, making sure that you were COVID tested for the jobs that you were going to do that then got moved or got canceled. So no people weren't working. And I was able to work full time throughout most of that, 5 days a week. And I don't know that I can say what it was on, but I spent 200 days on that set in a year and a half. And so I made a lot of connections and I learned a lot. And then the strike hit right after COVID was kind of straightening out. And so when all the big productions went down, there was no background to go be background on, but it didn't really affect indie filmmakers. There's that whole difference between the artists who would like to be paid, but are mainly in it for the art. And then the industry that's not particularly about the art. It's just about turning a profit. And there's a clash when you're making art, not for art's sake, which is very frustrating to the artists that are involved. But there were people that wanted to keep making art. So I'm involved with people that we help each other make film. And none of us get paid. And officially, occasionally we diverge, but officially we don't even get fed. We bring our own food. We work for free. We may shoot 15 hours a day. People bring their equipment. We have people of all levels, of all different parts of the industry. And if you want to learn something, you go be the assistant of the camera person that knows something. Mm-hmm. If you want to be the sound person, go learn from the sound person. You want to write something and present it to us. We'll decide. We're probably going to film it. We may make suggestions and then we'll work it into a rotation. And when we get to it, we're going to film it and produce it. And so if you've never directed, you can direct your first film. You can produce your first film. You can write your first film. We may even have 2,000 members in a year. But then there's the difference in the people that have signed up and the people that are actually doing it. The people that are showing up are the ones that keep, this person was here, I'm going to use this person. So there's a small core of us that just keep calling each other and making art. And so it's great when I get a gig because people will hear about me, and it's not me, it's just the industry. If you do enough stuff, word will get out and you'll get a call from somebody you don't know. And maybe you were the second choice 3 years ago for something and you don't even know who these people are. And they're like, yeah, we almost used you 3 years ago. You're right for this part. Or somebody falls out at the last minute. They're trying to film and they just ask the actors, do you know somebody that can do this job? We need somebody to take this job. They'll call and say, are you available or are you interested? So a lot of times the stuff I'm in, I didn't even apply for. People are like, well, where are you finding this work? It's just because I've been doing the work. And when I'm on a set, I try to get at least 2 or 3. We network a lot. And so if I hit it off with somebody just for a few minutes, like, oh, do you network? Oh yeah, I network. What social media do you use? And so we've known each other for 5 minutes. We've exchanged our Facebook, our Instagram, and we may or may not talk, but we start seeing what people are posting and what their strengths are and what they do and what we think that. And somebody will call me, I'll call them. Somebody's like, do you know anybody that can do this? I met them for 5 minutes, but I think they could. I could see if it's okay to give them your number. One guy, he filmed something recently. I noticed half of his crew, he had gotten off of my set. And somebody said, "Oh, does that make you angry?" Why would it make me angry? I only needed them for the day, but I had good enough people that other people wanted them. And he asked me he wanted to know if I could recommend a leading lady for his thing. I said, well, I could think of 3 people. I'll contact them. One of them worked out. And then she brought her sparring partner, who became one of the villains. And a guy he met through me, who he was using as a stand-in, ended up becoming the other villain and ended up getting a Best Actor award for his part in something he wasn't even originally cast in. So that's how the whole industry works. And so we get to watch each other grow and things. We all have our own path and we can help a little, but we can't really make somebody else's career. But a lot of us, it's like I think it was the guy from House was being interviewed, and he came through the ranks with the guy that did Monk. And so they knew each other. I don't know if they were friends or not, but they had worked together and come through the ranks together and were happy that each other had gotten parts in their own series. And at a lower level, I've been able to watch people do that. We watch each other grow and learn new things. I let a few film students come on my set. I didn't really need the help, but I'm like, these people just got out of film school. They've got nothing for their resume. They can move stuff around, even though I've got people. And like one girl was just so excited that she got to hold the boom mic. I mean, this was huge for her.
Yeah.
And one of those girls, and this was only a few months ago, has already filmed her own film.
Nice.
So you watch people at ground zero that are already, and people that I knew a few years ago have several productions of their own under their belt. So it's not just watching the stuff I'm growing, it's watching other people grow too. So I don't know. I've just kind of fallen into it, but it turns out that it was part of who I am. I just didn't know it.
Yeah, that's very cool. You found a community. For me, like finding that place, and then, and those people, like that community, they do come to you when you're ready, when you're finally open to it, I think. And in my experience, there's always some sort of breakthrough that occurs. You shared about your job and losing your job, and I don't know. I know, for me, as in my experience, right, has been jobs are jobs, and then you shared about the experience of having those, being profit driven, and the culture in which we have fostered is a corporate culture that um it's a thing, about profit, and then it, really what trickles down is bullshit. you know and so inevitably we always end up in this these situations where we see what's happening or what's going on, and it's turns into very political atmospheres that some are more toxic than others, but it tends to have that sort of what we've heard people call it cold corporate policy. And then inevitably, the money is the number one motivator behind the scenario, and it lacks all human interaction. And so then it just affirms that dissociation, that disconnection, that isolation. It affirms it, and it encourages it. And so then it inevitably is like all your fault, none of the company's fault or whatever. And of course, it's always good not to like talk trash about, people you worked with or whatever. But that experience of being able to find people, and you didn't even, you kind of accidentally started doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then that affects people. It's like, oh man, he just, I remember looking and seeing, some of the things that you posted. And I'm like, he's just going for it. He's just going for it. And that's so cool to watch, to see somebody just making it happen. And then, you're sitting here talking with me and you're saying, like, I kind of didn't have anything to do. So I just went there. It was suggested of me to go try this out. And then ultimately, you've fallen into this community and culture that everybody's just really wanting to do their art and make their art. And some of it might not be the best, but then some of it wins awards. And so for me, it's like, that's a beautiful thing to be a part of, and to be able to have a life that isn't just constantly scraping to get by without some sort of experience.
Well, we've talked about this recently too, different people. There was a article came out not too long ago comparing specifically British film to American film, and why it is that now some of your American film is the leads are now British, even if they're faking that they're Americans and they're pulling it off, and why British film is so different. And British film is about film. I mean, it's about art.
Yeah.
And it's about acting. And it's not about whether you've got enhancements or you're on steroids or you're projecting this certain thing. It's okay to have bad teeth or big ears
Right.
if you can act.
Right.
And so they're putting in the acting, and we're putting in the what we can present and throwing money at it. And other countries often don't have the money. I mean, it's not that they're not making money, but compared to, they're not making $30 million a movie.
Right.
They're not filming a $200 million movie. But if you watch a British detective novel or one in the Netherlands, it's different than the same type of thing here. And in most cases, better. And the indie scene is a lot the same way. The money is not there. The equipment is not there. But what can you do with what you've got? So you focus on the story, and you focus on the acting, and you focus on the writing, and it's often better stuff. And for the people that do this, it's really, we talk about it being homecomings. Every set you walk on, and no matter how far you go, you're several hours from home and walk on a set, and there's somebody you know. And those of us that worked on the series that I'm not going to mention, but it was an awesome series. We did it so long, and some people were there I did it for a year and a half. Some people did it for the entire run of the show, 6 seasons. And we have our own private Facebook page that nobody else can see.
Yeah.
We're still in touch with each other, and
That's
we can
excellent.
post things that can't be posted in public that we can see. And we're constantly sending pictures. Look who I found today. It's like a big family. And you'll be on set and not know somebody's there, and they maybe just got cast last night. They're screaming across, "What are you doing here? It's so good to see you." It's just constant. The only reason I found where I was supposed to audition the other day, somebody else that was auditioning an hour and a half from where I live. Like, I'm on a college campus, and people that don't look like they're college, like, because the address wasn't right. And I'm like, I know that guy. Well, they were up there doing the same thing I was. We've all driven way out of our way to go up there to do, in this case, student films, where film students have to do a film in order to graduate. And to do that film, they've got to cast actors, and they've got to come up with a crew and put this thing together. And I still do this. I've worked for most of the students at most of these schools, but this one I'd never been at, because we're making art. And I forget how old people are. I'm freaking old. I'll be hanging out with my peers just talking about the industry and realize these people are less than half my age. But they know stuff about the industry, and they're all, everybody's learning about the lighting or the new cameras or how to do the angles or how would you frame this shot, or how would you present this, this character? And so we're all growing. And it doesn't matter if you're 56 or been in it for 4 years, or you're 22, or you've been doing it for 30 years. I mean, there's some people that don't care, but a lot of people, we just want to help each other.
Man, that's awesome. That's a really cool, like experience, man. That's a really cool story to hear. Like, I love it. I think it's amazing that you're doing it. And so we're getting close to hitting an hour. So is there anything, I've started to do this at the end, is ask people if there's anything that is there anything that you would like to tell the audience, if they're, watching and getting inspired by, your story in particular, and in general, is there anything that you would like to say to people who might be struggling or might be having a hard time with relating and connecting with folks, and what they can do, or what you feel like would be something personal to share that helped you?
Well, certainly nothing original, but I mean, there's something to be open-minded to things, because as we discussed, I had no idea, one, that I'd be in Atlanta, much less that I'd be acting. Don't give up. And as we've talked about some of my story, I mean, with the drinking and whatnot, I couldn't get through the day without doing something every day. And I couldn't conceive of being able to get through the day without altering my reality in some sort of way. And yet, when I was able to get away from that, I was able to get comfortable in my skin most of the time. So I don't need any of that. And learn who I am as an adult. I mean, I'm still growing up, but I'm like, maybe not just for other people, and sometimes does it even matter, but maybe I'm an interesting enough person for me to get to know, and as I get to know myself, somebody one time said, the way we get to know what we enjoy, sometimes it's by finding what we don't enjoy. For them, they said they rode a horse and they hated it. They don't want to ever be on another horse. Now, that's not me. I'd love to be on a horse all the time. But they said, they realized they're not a horse person. So they could eliminate that and try something else.
So essentially allowing yourself not to like certain things and being okay with that too.
Well, I mentioned football. Everybody loves football. I can watch a game here and there, but I don't really love football. It's okay for other people. I don't care. But I don't have to love football because you love football.
Right.
I can love something else. It's okay to be different and have my own likes and interests, and to admit that. And then over time, I'll probably find other people that like the things I like. Mm-hmm. But it's still okay for those other people to like the other things. So, most people don't want to go out and go hike 5 miles or go crawl down in a cave or an abandoned train tunnel. But I like doing that stuff, and I meet other people that like doing that stuff.
So, and also, I would say that I would interrupt you and say, you've gone from a place of being like open to it, right? Open to, what this thing can offer, and sort of moving from a place of hobby to career minded in your experience. And so that's moved in I guess a natural progression. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you consider yourself career, filming and video production?
I mean, I don't know if I'm planning to do that the rest of my life. I'm certainly not planning to do it the rest of my life, but I do consider myself to be a career film person at this time.
Yeah.
And part of it too, because the other day I had a day I was just off, and I felt really bad about it because other people were there too, putting their all into it. And it may turn out all right. That's the incredible thing, is they'll put it through post and it may look wonderful. But I don't know that I was the strongest piece of that team, and I felt bad about it. But I can allow myself to have a bad day, whether it be professionally or whether it be my mood, my attitude, how I feel. I can have a depressed day. I can have a couple of bad days. I don't have to go do something crazy because I know some of the best things that have happened to me have been after periods of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes I just don't feel like auditioning and I'm like, I'm just not going to do it. And then I'm like, well, what else am I doing right now? And so I'll pull up a couple of the places and put in a couple of things, and I don't care whether I get them or not. But then if, you know, somebody's like, hey, we're interested in your stuff. Could you do a Zoom or can you come by? And like, hey, somebody likes my stuff. You know, it's like, I didn't even want to put it in, but now, hey, somebody likes my stuff. And then I get there. Some of the stuff that just looks kind of bland turns out to be really exciting stuff. And some of the stuff that's for like really big people that you think is going to be really cool, could have done without going. But you don't know till you go.
Right.
You just don't know. So give it a chance, get off my butt when I'm not wanting to do it, do something. And then if I put enough stuff out there, somebody was like, how do you stay working all the time? And this was just with background work. And I'm like, well, I go online and look up 12 different sites and apply for everything that looks like I match. And if 3 of 12 or 15 things come back, that's 3 things I'm doing. You know, if I don't apply for 15, I'm getting nothing. But now I've got 3 and other people aren't working. And they're like, there's no work out there. And I'm like, well, you can go on the same sites I went on. The work's there. You just got to work to get the work.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's excellent, man. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any to, I don't know, younger audience, anything? If not, that's fine too.
I mean, for a younger audience, I mean, you know, it's there. You know, it's
mm-hmm.
for like this industry is not something most people think they can do. But there's something in this industry for everybody if they want to do it. I mean,
mm-hmm.
I don't know how it's going to be with AI and how it's changing everything, but plenty of people have been successful. And I've studied some of the people that are big, many of the people that are very well known, and I won't, but their biographies and their interviews and whatnot never intended to do this. They fell into it just like I did. It's a different path for each of them, but some of these people are A-listers that make $30 million a movie
mm-hmm.
that accidentally ended up in film. Some of them really love it. Some of them, it's just what they do. They don't care one way or the other, but it's what they've ended up doing. You can be successful in it. You just don't know up front where, like Ron Howard's a good example. We know him as Opie. We know him from Happy Days,
mm-hmm.
but he's known now as a director.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he started off as this, he became that, and he's really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But was that his plan? I don't know. You know, you see this little kid that's Opie, and the next thing you know, he's making these huge movies.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea till you get in the industry. You know, we don't see a lot of Mark Hamill. He was huge in Star Wars. It's not that he's vanished from in front of the camera. So he's behind the scenes. He's directing. He's doing voiceovers. He's
mm-hmm.
moving the stuff around. Different people find their place. But you can, and it doesn't have to be this industry. It can be any industry. But do what you love. And don't think you can't do it just because it seems difficult.
I hear you. Thank you, man.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate your words and you sharing with us. So, Jay, thank you again very much for driving all the way up here to 4 hours away to sit with me and do this interview, man. I really appreciate it. I did not expect it, wasn't planning on it, and this has been an excellent little sit down and experience, man.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, of course. And with that, you want to say bye?
Adios, au revoir.
Have a good one, guys.
Have a good one, guys.
Thanks for watching. Oh.
But wait! There's more.
YouTube, Facebook, owlstar.com.
Remember, hit that notification bell if you haven't already to ensure you receive all the pertinent alerts. Okay? All right. Are we clear? All right. Okay. Well, y'all take care and send my love and tell Mama I said I love her. Okay? Bye. For real this time. Bye.
Bye.
Hard disk, ROM drive, what West Wind was bueno, and battered potato. Simple solar cellular charger, but I need a larger amount of chip, cause every pop up make my USB coffee warm.
I'm just trying to document this.
Command skin my brain to find 30,000 viruses. Hint that acid rain had rent my NTFS system. My bride's been reformatted. Ends of my document, personal tax information. cause errors and data. I'm left broken hearted. I entered safe mode about 3 years ago. Never does he processes populate my test manager. Faking the funk can take a dump on my network. Comedy administrative account holder. A cold users. Bandwidth abuses tonight. Bring your 212 a crawl. Claim you know of no reason at all. The internet to be slow and unresponsive. My email works, but I can't get on the web. Better call Gates before you back up. He says he plays Platters. Idealist. Feels not meaning to ramble, but is there any way I can get Discovery Channel on my Windows Media Player? DR hey, make me wanna hack all I see. Repost FTP for free with the ATR ID emo technology or do it cool. Plug and play all day, since the days of 98. I don't find the time I allocate. Take a bunch from the stack.